Hey everybody, I'm the Lazy Quilter and I'm back with Quilt Basics, and today we're going to be putting those layers together. All right everybody, this week we are doing backings and we are going to layer that quilt together. Now, before we get started, I want to give you guys a little lecture about sheets on the back of our quilts. We all thought about it at one point in time about I don't feel like piecing a backing together, or I don't feel like spending a certain amount of money on my backing. I'm just going to go out and get a sheet and put a back on it. And that is a terrible idea. Don't put a sheet on the back of your quilt, okay? It is not the same as regular quilting fabric. It's actually very different. It's dyed differently, it's treated differently. It could be really low thread count and then it just disintegrates in 10 years, which we want those quilts to last forever. So, when you have that temptation to go out and buy a sheet for the back of your beautiful quilt that you just made, just remember these words. Sheets are a bad idea, okay? Bad idea. Don't use sheets. The reason I'm so adamant about it is because at least once a week I get a long armor customer that comes in and has this beautifully pieced quilt and has a sheet for the backing. And I almost always talk them out of it because I know the hardships that it's not only going to give me, but also them as the quilt progresses in its life. So take that into consideration. Don't use sheets. Lazy Quilter says bad. Okay. The next thing we're going to be talking about is a lot about batting and a lot about layering and what kind of products we can use to layer our stuff. And there's a bunch of different ways to do to put it all together. So you just kind of pick what's best for you, and I'll show you what my favorite way is. So let's take it over to the board. Okay, so here I have laid out my top for my table topper or hot pad, and then I have the backing on it as well. And as you can see, on all sides, the backing is a couple inches bigger. When you are quilting on your own home machine, you usually want a couple extra inches for your backing and your batting. This is so if the top shifts, we'll still have backing behind it. And when we quilt, it might shrink our top just a hair. So we don't want to cut a perfect backing. It can end up, we can end up being in trouble. So, and if you are taking it to a long armor, depending on a long armor, most of them like at least 4 inches bigger for your backing on all sides. And but definitely check with them before you cut, because some like even more, like 6 to 8, and really it depends on the setup that they're using. So keep that in mind. And I'm going to remove my top here. Now, as you can see, my backing isn't solid, and most of my backings aren't, because I like to use scraps to make a backing, because I hate having scraps laying around everywhere. So this works out. And I've put my scraps together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, I've done this because my project is small. If I was doing a large quilt, I would actually do a 1/2 inch seam allowance, just because I'm not sure. That's the way I've always done it. When I'm doing small projects like this, I'm not always as careful as when I'm doing a large project. But anyway, so I've put some seams in this to sew it all together, and notice I have pressed them flat. Always press your seams flat for a backing. The reason being is because if we fold this over, okay, we create a larger hump throughout the whole quilt than if we had just pressed open, okay? This comes in big when you're long arming and you're going through a lot of seams. We can pop thread, and same thing happens on your home machine too. We want to distribute this fabric, this seam, as much as we can, as evenly as we can, without making too big of a hump to go over. The other reason, I have 2 seams here and a couple right here. Never just put 1 seam in your backing, okay? Always put multiple seams, at least 2. Now don't go and put like 100, because that would be bad. But when you're putting your backing together, don't just make 1 seam up the center. The reason being is if we just have 1 seam up the center, we're creating just 1 hump in the center, which makes everything kind of stack in that center and then slant down towards the end of your quilt. When you're hanging a quilt, or when you are doing it, when you have it on the long arm, it becomes way more apparent. This problem becomes way more apparent. So always put multiple seams. I like to put 2 seams, and I like to put them on either side. That way it's evenly distributed. A little thing, but it does make a big difference. So, and it doesn't take any extra fabric, and it doesn't take any more of your time. So highly recommend doing 2 seams. So the way, and an really easy way to do 2 seams is to have your lengths of fabric, okay? So here I have a lovely piece of red. I still have this, this crease that comes on the bolt. I use it so much, I never press it out. What you would do is you would take your 2 pieces of fabric and you sew your selvage edge together using a 1/2 inch seam, okay? And you sew both sides, okay? So you're basically making a tube of fabric with 2 pieces of fabric, okay? And then you're gonna take your scissors and you're gonna cut up this seam, or this crinkle, this press, this fold. And then you're gonna open it up and you'll have seams on both sides. It makes it even. Now I have 4 seams in my backing. Be very careful when you are a beginner on doing too much piecing in your backing. So you don't want to just have 1 seam, but you don't want to have 100 seams, okay? The more seams that you put in, the more it can stretch and shift, okay? Because we're sewing through it. So if you put a lot of seams in your backing, you can get a backing that is slightly diamond shaped. Also, if you put piece blocks in your backing, they can also stretch. Your top stretches like crazy, and we do things to prevent that. If we have both the top and the bottom stretching at the same time, we can get some really interesting variation going on in the quilt top. So be careful of piece quilt tops. When you're first starting out, I recommend just using 2 pieces of fabric to do your quilt backing with. The next thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is putting your fabric together.